We're going to start with a pretty basic shot that you're going to face a lot, and that is just finishing a little bit short of the green. We're only a few paces off. There's nothing really scary to worry about here. Yes, the green has been treated not long ago with the holes punched. The fairways are just starting to change color, so it's a little bit bumpy here. But most of you, without a second thought, will go for your wedge, no matter where you're at around the green. But how do you know what club to use? The only way you're going to know is to just practice. Try some different shots out. So if we put the sand wedge down here, I've got my 56. I've got to be very precise. I've got to get my technique just right to be able to get that spin to get it close. I don't have much margin for error, and that's the thing. When you use a sand wedge, you have to get that precision. Here's what I mean. With the sand wedge, to be able to get the ball first in that compression, we really have to get that sort of shaft leaning forward to be able to get that correct contact. It's very easy for us to hit it a little bit behind or hit it a little bit too thin. That's going to give us a bit of problems. But if we use an 8-iron, our angle of attack is just that more shallow. Instead of having to get it so perfectly every time, we can have a little bit of loft, we can have a bit less loft. We can get it a little bit behind because we are brushing through. It's a bit more forgiving. So generally, I would recommend you use the 8-iron. Most people say use a 7-iron, but I find that that kind of strength of loft comes off a little hot. And I like to suggest to people an 8 or a 9-iron because it's sort of the mid-range between a bump and run, between a sand wedge kind of chip shot. It gives us a big margin for error, which is going to increase your confidence. I'm going to give you some tips on technique in just a moment, but here's another example. We are just a little bit kind of left of the green, long of the flag. I haven't missed the green by much, but I've got a bit of rough. There is quite a lot of green to work with. We are on a bit of an upslope. Most of the time, I will see people grab the sand wedge, which is fine if you know how to play it. If you know how to get the ball out of a juicy lie, to land it where you want, so it rolls out the exact correct amount, all right, that you can still get the ball close. But what happens so often out of these kind of lies, we sort of quit on it, we get a bit tight, and we end up kind of duffing it, okay? Now, I'm not here to say don't use your wedge, but I'm saying try it, depending on the lie. So if you look up here, this ball is sat up a little bit. This one is buried. I am not going to hit my 8-iron out of this one, obviously, but here, why wouldn't I hit my 8-iron? To bump it over the brow of the hill, to get it rolling down the slope a bit closer to the green. Do I feel like I can hole it? Maybe not, but I am feeling pretty confident because my action is just that much shorter. I'm going to at least have a decent strike, a decent attempt at a par putt. But yes, when this ball is buried here, an 8-iron's not going to cut it, it's going to just sort of fluff into the ground. So we have to use the sand iron to cut through that rough to pop it a little bit higher. So we have to have a lot more suppleness in the arms, okay? We don't want the arms to be dead rigid like this. We want them to be firm and maintaining this triangle shape, but we want to have suppleness, okay? The arms are feeling very soft because that's going to help us emulate that throwing feel, which is what we want. The next big key I want you to do, every chip shot, and this applies to the sand wedge and the 8-iron, I want you to feel like your upper arm here is connected to your chest, all right? We're not sort of sticking the elbows in, we're just feeling a little bit more connected with the upper body. And what that's going to do is stop this killer move, which causes a lot of duff shots where the arm separates. The body stops and the arm separates because we still want to feel a bit of rotation this way, okay? but we don't want the arm separating. That's where we get inconsistent distances, inconsistent strikes, and angle of attack. So keep the upper arms connected to your chest, your upper body here at all times. And the same angle from the arm to the club is pretty much maintained all the way throughout, okay? See how it's staying pointing at me? I'm not flipping it, I'm not extending it that way. It's staying connected but smooth. You just have to get a bit more confident at accelerating through with that sensation, because we don't want to be having too many heavy shots. Now, here's a couple of tips for bump and run or regular chips with an 8-iron. This is a perfect example of, even though we've got lots of green to work with and no obstacles in front of us here is our hazard. We've got a collar, a thick fringe just off the green. So you might think, well, 8-iron is the right club, but the problem is, because of the shallower sort of action, that grass is going to be interfering. So it's going to cause a bit of issues. So what we have to do, for the same shot, we can now still use a sand wedge or something like that, because we're able to pick the club up and strike down a little bit more. If we did that with the 8-iron, it's just not going to work. So the same kind of technique that we discussed earlier, don't worry too much about adjusting with the fringe. The blade of the club will cut through it for you. So again, choose wisely. Again, we are staying connected like I talked about with the wedge, but we are keeping this club very low to the ground from here to here. We're not trying to sort of pick it up too much. It's the simplest action you can do. But to give yourself a little bit more control, grip down the club a hair, have a bit more weight on the front side of your body, and just stand a little bit closer. So when you stand a little bit closer, the club is going to have less friction. We're just going to be moving it this way, so less of the sole of the club is going to be touching the turf, okay? It's going to brush through just that little bit easier. And by doing that, you're going to start getting a very nice little foundation of chipping that gives you the confidence that you want. Test it out on the golf course. Try some different scenarios, even simple ones like this. You might always go for your wedge, trying to get that nippy strike, but it's not always going to work out. So what you want to try and do is test this bump and run, if you will, but just a basic chip shot that is at least going to get you somewhat closer. It makes golf just that little bit easier, your confidence a little bit higher. And you know what else will? This video right here. If you never want to worry about bunker shots again, I would love you to test this trick out, and I'll see you next time.